The Devastator's heart clenched, and fear gripped his guts for the first time. They shouted and screamed and laughed and pointed. Another sound cut through the air, this one louder than the rest, like a banshee's wail, and the place was bathed in the light of a dancing blue flame. Manath had fought demons, dragons, even sorcerers who pulled fire from the heavens, but this was something beyond madness. No warrior could conquer such an insane realm. It was too far gone. Dark Margins presents Kingdom of Madness by Ian Hand. Blood steamed on Manath the Devastator's axe as he wrenched it free from the ribcage of the last of the cave beasts. He stood alone in the shadowed cavern, his chest heaving. The stench of slaughter filled the tunnels. Spilt guts mingled with the coppery tang of victory. He had fought for what felt like days, hacking and roaring his way through the seemingly endless labyrinthine darkness. The beasts had come in waves, armored things with hooked claws, screeching bats with fangs like daggers, even a blind giant three-headed serpent that spat acid as it thrashed in death. The cave floor was slick with gore, and still Manath pressed on, driven by instinct and the ancient call of conquest. The Scarlet Wizard's minions were protecting something here, some arcane knowledge beyond imagination, and it was his quest, given to him by the dark mistress of the Nine Veils, to seek it out. The cavern finally opened into a vast, circular chamber lit by an eerie, pulsating crimson glow. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone archway, its surface rippling as if in a heat haze. Strange runes burned along its edge, each one pulsing with sorcerous life. To the side of the portal cowered the high priest of the Scarlet Wizard, a gaunt figure in crimson robes, his skeletal fingers clutching a crooked staff topped with a shard of black crystal. When he saw Manath, the priest didn't run. Instead, he collapsed to his knees, staff rattling against the stone, and began to babble. "You cannot pass, barbarian. The Scarlet Wizard has foreseen this day. The third prophecy is upon us. Through there," he pointed to the portal with a shaking hand. "A place beyond comprehension." Manath considered the wretched creature, his face unreadable in the crimson glow. For a moment, it seemed as though he might heed the warning. The priest continued his plea, sensing Manath's hesitancy. "Passing through the portal will have dire consequences for both worlds." Manath swung his axe in a lazy arc. The blade whispered through air and bone alike, and the high priest's head rolled across the floor like a dropped pomegranate. Manath wiped the blade clean on the dead man's robes. "I care not for prophecies," he muttered, planting his boots before the portal. Triumph awaited beyond, perhaps a treasure hoard, or a new land ripe for plundering. He spat blood from his teeth, tightened the straps of his hide armor, and strode into the light. At once, the world convulsed. The stone beneath his boots dissolved into nothing. He felt himself falling, though there was no wind, no sky, only a churning vortex of shadow and light. Crimson runes spiraled around him like carrion birds. Echoes of voices he had slain hissed in his ears. He saw flashes of battles not yet fought, and heard the weeping of gods long dead. Something vast and cold brushed his mind, like a glacier shifting in darkness. "You do not belong here," it whispered. But Manath only snarled and pushed forward. The air thickened, pressing against his chest. His axe hummed as if alive, yearning for slaughter. Then came the tearing sensation, as if his body were being pulled apart and reassembled by unseen claws. Fire licked his bones. His vision split in two, one eye seeing the labyrinth he left behind, the other glimpsing a strange white light ahead. With a final lurch, reality snapped back into place. He stumbled, boots striking solid ground. Light flooded his vision, and he emerged into daylight, and madness swallowed him whole. Sheer walls of smooth ice rose on either side, stretching endlessly into the distance. But this was like no gorge he had ever seen. It roared with an endless stream of soulless chariots that hurtled by without steeds, their shrieks louder than battle horns. They were of every color he had seen, and a number he could never have imagined. The gleaming beasts roared past him in both directions, their eyes burning red, orange, and white. One carriage clipping his arm, sending him staggering to the side before it sped away into the distance, its occupant screaming at him through its window. The ground beneath his boots was no stone he knew, but a river of tar frozen in place, split by gleaming silvery white lines. Above, a strange sky of impossible blue shuddered as a great silver bird screamed across it, leaving a white scar in its wake. Thunder boomed, yet there was no storm, and the ground thrummed beneath his boots, yet he could see no signs of a quake. The air around him was thick and sour, stinking of burning pitch and poisonous vapors. He staggered, coughing, eyes watering. He had smelt the breath of the great worm, but this was far worse than that putrid stench. People, if they could be called that, lined the canyon edges. Soft-skinned, many as pale as grubs, draped in bizarre garb of colors and cuts Manath could not fathom. They clutched glowing magic stones, speaking into them as if to spirits, eyes darting to him only briefly before skittering away. A great yellow bird-shaped demon with human legs shoved a piece of parchment, covered in eldritch runes, into his hand, and then wandered away. Hung on the glaciers were cyclopean moving tapestries. A giant sorceress, painted in colors too bright for any dye he knew, poured black liquid from a red barrel, adorned with strange white glyphs, into a crystal chalice. Another showed a giant eating a piece of meat the size Manath had never seen before. The cut must have been from a beast the size of the city of Naruth. Then, through the throng, something caught his eye. Mesmerized, he shouldered his way toward it, his head throbbing in disbelief. And there before him, set within a glacial wall of ice, a multitude of black boxes, each one containing spirits imprisoned within, writhing and screaming soundlessly. A small crowd of pale-skinned creatures had even abandoned their glowing magic stones to gape and laugh at the trapped spirits, pointing, mocking their torment. "This is a cruel, pitiless place," Manath growled under his breath. A sudden metallic shriek ripped through the din behind him, like the death squeal of some unseen war machine tearing the very air. Instinct took over as he spun, muscles coiling, just as a chariot screeched to a halt a blade's width away from him. With the reflexes of a Tungusi mountain lion, Manath sprang back and brought his axe crashing down on the front of the chariot, cleaving it in two. A creature scrambled from the chariot, shaking its fist, shouting at Manath in words he could not begin to understand, but knew were not kind. The other creatures noticed the tumult, and holding their glowing stones in front of them, crowded around him, calling out in their bizarre tongue. Small fires shone forth from the stones as bright as a sun, blinding and confusing Manath. The crowd roared, and more of the creatures crowded in on him. The Devastator's heart clenched, and fear gripped his guts for the first time. Not since the goblin hordes of Asmore had he faced such a press. They shouted, and screamed and laughed and pointed. Another sound cut through the air, this one louder than the rest, like a banshee's wail, and the place was bathed in the light of a dancing blue flame. Manath had fought demons, dragons, even sorcerers who pulled fire from the heavens. But this was something beyond madness. No warrior could conquer such an insane realm. It was too far gone. With a grunt that was half snarl, half laugh, Manath forced his way through the throng. Back along the icy canyon, past the glaring tapestries and traders of foul-smelling food. He plunged back into the black cave mouth like a hunted beast, his breath ragged, his body slick with sweat. The darkness closed around him. The insane lights and sound faded. He felt himself torn apart and remade. Then the labyrinth's familiar stink of blood and earth returned like an old friend. He did not remember much about retracing his steps back through the labyrinth, but when daylight finally struck his face again, it was golden, warm, and familiar. The cave opened not onto madness, but a sunlit plateau where an indigo-scaled dragon wheeled lazily overhead. Manath wiped grime from his brow, slung his axe over his shoulder, and crossed the rocky ground to his great lizard steed. The creature snorted, stamping clawed feet in greeting. Looking up at the vermilion sky with its two blazing suns, Manath patted the beast's scaled neck. "'Tis good, Gerok," he said in a low, certain growl, "to be back in the real world." The barbarian swung into the saddle, then reached into his pouch, pulling forth the parchment the yellow bird demon had thrust upon him. The runes blazed in strange red ink, curling like fire through the vellum. He studied it for a moment, brow furrowing. He could not read their meaning, but deep in his warrior's heart, he knew these words could shape the fate of kingdoms, whispering of riches, alliances, and hunger. "Dark magic," he muttered, tucking it away. "One day the Scarlet Wizard will rue the day such a relic crossed my path." He raised his axe to whichever gods were watching and spurred Gerok toward the horizon, where saner kingdoms waited to be shattered beneath his blade.